All right, good morning, everybody.
Hey guys.
I'm Chris.
I'm Mark.
We're here for 54015. This is installment number 8. Can you believe we've been doing this for almost 2 months?
Wow.
It's hard to believe. We've come so far in such a short period of time. For those of you that may be joining in for the first time, we get on every Wednesday morning, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, and talk for about 15 minutes about technology, about things that involve our federal government. We call it 54015 because we're 540.co. That's the name of our company. I'm Chris. You can follow me on Twitter at PCBock.
You can see me at Mark_Ostrander.
And you probably, if you're following us on Meerkat or you're watching this live on Meerkat or Periscope, at 540co is our Twitter handle, so that's how you can get updates on our upcoming events. So we'll talk about a couple of interesting topics, I think, today. The first thing I want to talk about, our friends at 18F put a blog post up yesterday, and if you don't track the things that 18F is doing, you're really missing out on hearing about innovative things that the government is doing. They've got a blog. I've got an if this then that notification set up to notify me every time they put a blog post up, because it's really interesting, cutting edge stuff. They put up something yesterday about the Data Act. Mark, are you familiar with the Data Act?
No, I'm not.
So the Data Act it was passed in 2004, May of 2004. It's the Digital Accountability and Transparency Act. And really what it's about is enabling the government to actually report, identify how it spends all its money. The government spent $3.8 trillion last year. And there are a variety of ways that data gets reported about how that money is spent. Some of it gets spent through contracts, some of it's through grants. Obviously, some of it is payroll for government employees. There are different subsidy programs, so all these different ways that money goes out from the government, but there's no real central way to identify where's all that money going and what's it being used for. So the intent of the Data Act is to really drive federal agencies to move towards data standards that will then enable that reporting to happen. And so 18F has actually been doing some things to help with that process. The Data Act, the responsibility for implementation of it rests with the Department of the Treasury and the Office of Management and Budget. And 18F has been working with Treasury in particular on a couple of aspects of implementing the Data Act. They've been helping with developing online collaboration space, helping vendors in developing pilot programs. But one of the things that's interesting to me, a lot of you guys probably don't know this, but I'm a former government contracting official. They're calling it RFP ghostwriting, and basically they're helping agencies write their requests for proposals so that they can comply with the Data Act and make sure that those data standards are built into the RFPs, which I think is a great thing, because again, as a former contracting person, you've got laws, regulations, and policies that you have to follow, but the actual implementation of those can be very different depending on what agency you sit in. You learn from your boss, you learn from the people that are around you how to write your RFP and how to do those things. And 18F's consulting organization providing some actual hands-on guidance for contracting officers, I think that's a great thing. I think that's going to help drive consistency and help with the implementation.
Kind of accelerate that learning curve.
Yeah, exactly, and make sure that across agencies that things are being done the same way. But I think one of the other cool aspects of the Data Act, I'm going to talk a little bit about this in the next topic I'm going to talk about, is just kind of driving those data standards and enabling the government from a contractual spend perspective to get more consistency and more visibility into where those dollars are going, what money is being spent on. There's reporting that happens today through a system called the Federal Procurement Data System Next Generation, but it's very high level. It's kind of at contract level. Here's how much money we spent, here's who we spent it with, and here's at a high level what we spent it on. But I believe there's a huge opportunity because at the agency levels, they're capturing more granular data about, not just at a high category level. We spent this on IT services, or we spent this on computer hardware or office supplies, but really granular. We bought pencils, or we bought data architects, or whatever really specific thing they're buying. So they're capturing that data, but it just resides within that agency, and so by driving more data standards in terms of how to track those things, has the potential to allow greater exposure of that data and be able to do more things across the government to look at, what's the government spending on pencils and data architects and things like that. So I think, with an organization as massive as the U.S. federal government, doing something like this is never simple. Because there's so many different organizations and so many different processes and procedures that have kind of grown up over time to kind of break those old hierarchies, those old ways of doing business down, can be difficult. But I think through organizations like 18F, we're definitely moving in the right direction.
That's good transparency.
Yeah, and exactly, transparency is what it's all about.
Yeah. So I have two interesting. Well, it's one interesting topic involving two items. Apple recently had their WWDC, which for those who don't know, it's the Worldwide Developers Conference. It's more of just, it's not about the products like Apple as always is. It's more focused on the developers and what kind of features and enhancements they have. But two interesting ones that came out of that conference was they are introducing a search API, which taps into Apple's Spotlight feature. So with this allows developers to expose app data and information to users, allowing them to basically index that information. So an example they had was if a user searches potatoes, then instead of it going out to Google and searching potatoes, it would search a relevant app, like a recipe app, and bring up like French fries. So it basically brings all that information natively through the phone versus going out to Google and searching. It's kind of like a new search and indexing. It basically they called it deep linking third-party apps through your phone versus, like I said, going out to Google and searching.
So does that allow me as a user, based on the apps that are on my phone and the things that I use on a frequent basis, it's going to supposedly drive more relevant or better search results?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So it gives developers a chance to kind of think a new way of how to develop their apps. If there's certain information that they need to expose through their apps, they can now through that search. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Another big thing that they announced is that we all think about privacy, and they said like none of the data will be shared open, so it's all on your phone and it's only you that you're seeing it. It's not being outsourced or shared to anybody. So that was a good thing that Apple kind of revealed that with that search API. And then the next thing is a new programming language that they introduced is Swift 2. It's been, I think, in beta since iOS 8, but basically what it is, it's a new programming language. Currently, Apple, you had to develop in Objective-C, and it was a big learning curve to get started in. And basically, they made a new, faster, a little bit easier to learn language, and it's open source, so it's now kind of competing with Google's Android, allowing a little bit more developers to reach out, play around with it, see if, they kind of already own the app market, but it kind of reaches out even more and getting people more interested with the open source aspect because they've kind of been closed doors for such a long time. So that's kind of a huge thing for Apple to just kind of say we're going to open source this and see where it goes. So that's.
So what do you think the potential is, from a government perspective, in terms of taking advantage of that?
Yeah, again, it just kind of opens it up to more developers. So hopefully they can even tap into getting like government developers to start using open sourced Swift and seeing if they can develop apps for the government. And we'll see where that goes, because it's been closed doors so long that it's even hard to get them to change. So
yeah. Was there any sort of indication as to why Apple's moving in this direction, other than the obvious that the more people they get exposure and more people that are doing things on their platform, obviously that's better for them.
Right.
Was there any other indication why this kind of shift to an open door?
I just think, nowadays everything is kind of shifting that way, and they need to respond to that market. So again, it was one of those beta things, and I think they're trying it out, and I think they still have some reservations about open sourcing it, just because they've done such a good job with keeping everything consistent. So I think it's just that times are changing, and they're trying out something new to see where it goes. So that's all I got, but 2 interesting facts about
that's cool.
Tech stuff for Apple.
That's cool. So if you've tuned into any of the other 540-15s that I've been a part of, I like to do something towards the end that I call the Skynet news update, and it's things that I find in the news that are indicators that we are moving closer and closer to the machines becoming self-aware. This one in particular is near and dear to my heart. There was an RFI, request for information, that was issued through GSA eBuy for Schedule 70 holders, and it was from GSA, Federal Acquisition Service, on cognitive computing. And if you're not familiar with cognitive computing, it's a really interesting space. I have a little bit of experience with it from a user perspective from one of my previous career endeavors. And I think the application of cognitive computing that most people are familiar with, a couple of years ago, IBM had its Watson capability participate on Jeopardy and play against 2 human champions, and it basically Watson just cleaned their clocks. And what cognitive computing is, it's sort of the next evolution of computing in terms of having a machine that can actually learn things. So on Jeopardy, what Watson would do, be posed the natural language question from Alex Trebek, and it would take that question, break it down into its elements, search its knowledge base, and I think they restricted the amount of data. It wasn't able to go out like World Wide Web type search, but it had a repository of knowledge, and then based on the words in the question and the data it had available to it, come up with potential responses and then assign a confidence score. And it was remarkable to sit and watch. I was an IBMer at the time, and I watched it, and I was maybe a little skeptical going in, but within the first 2 or 3 questions, I was like, holy cow, this is cool. But if you think about, obviously Jeopardy's, entertainment value is high, but if you think about the practical application of that in government, national security, connecting the dots, medicine, there's a huge application there. Well, the government is interested in it. And what the government is interested in doing, there's, as I mentioned before, there's so much data out there about what the government is spending its dollars on from an acquisition and procurement perspective. What the government is interested in doing is having a tool that government users can just pose questions to it, and as humans, we know what we know, and we have knowledge that we've ingested over our lifetimes, but a machine can ingest significantly more, huge amounts of data and have access to that. And so, the concept of being able to ask, am I paying a reasonable price for, this data architect, or am I going to have quality assurance issues with this particular product down the road, and the ability to comb across all this data that's available and come back with a response and a confidence score that says, I'm 98%
Right.
sure that the price that you're paying is reasonable, or I'm 47% sure that you're going to get a quality product from this particular vendor. That's what the government's interested in. It's also I know that they're also interested in, as I mentioned, the huge volume of laws, regulations, and policies that are out there, and in helping government procurement officials make sure that they're in compliance with those. As they're doing things, again, you kind of know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And a tool like that can really help. So this particular RFI, again, it's for Schedule 70 holders. The close date is June 16th. They're just looking for kind of what are the latest innovations in the commercial world around cognitive computing, and that they can potentially apply to these sorts of applications. So I think that's that's going to be a cool space to watch. It's moving towards the machines becoming self-aware. That it's just a matter of time before at the end of the Jeopardy with IBM Watson, one of the champions wrote his answer to the question, and at the bottom he said something like, "I look forward to serving my machine overlords," or whatever in the future, which is obviously a joke, but who knows? So that's it for today. We appreciate those of you that have joined on Meerkat and Periscope, and those of you that are watching after the fact on YouTube. Again, if you follow us on Twitter at 540co, you'll get updates about our next live stream 54015 session. Again, I'm Chris at PC Bock.
I'm Mark at Mark_Ostrander.
Yeah, we got to get you an easier Twitter handle.
Yeah, I know.